The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
The Ufo Roswell Incident was the apparent recovery of extraterrestrial debris, including alien corpses from a UFO that crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico, USA on July 7, 1947. Since the late 1970s, the incident has been the subject of theories as to the true nature of the The US government maintained that it was debris of a high-altitude surveillance balloon called Project Mogul. However, UFO researchers maintain that the military has engaged in a worldwide cover-up. I'm now joined by UFO authors and experts Donald Schmitt and Tom Carey to disclose the truth about the UFO Roswell crash that happened. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Glad to be with you,
Good evening,
Kevin.
Good to be back with you.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you on this show. You know, and you're on TV as well, so it's fantastic. And is this your first TV interview in the UK?
For me, it is.
And Donald?
No, because I had the good fortune of actually speaking in Cardiff, it's now over 25 years ago, and then numerous other occasions throughout Britain, Manchester, a number of times in Leeds, and in London as well.
Okay. Well, like I say, thank you both so much for joining us on tonight's show. So, 20 years on the case, what keeps you going, Tom?
Well, we, even though we've accumulated a mass of information, we are going to continue to investigate the case until the last witness croaks, or we croak, or we find the final proof that will be incontrovertible to most reasonable people. So we are on it until one of those things happens.
And Donald, I mean, do you find it's a sort of race with the Undertaker, though, doing this work?
Oh, of course. In fact, even 25 years ago, our colleagues at that time were already telling us, well, we'd never be able to investigate something 40 years old, something that was really unheard of within the field of ufology. And here we are now approaching 66 years. And as Tom just described, we're making every final effort to track down every surviving witness and beyond, even their families, their spouses, anyone who is able to provide us with any slightest piece of information regarding the incident. And it's amazing how it all describes the very same event. And after all these years, I think there isn't a week that goes by that something happens that we come away all the more enthusiastic that we are going to solve this.
Yes, because I suppose you're in it for the very long run now. I mean, what is the future of this work? I mean, obviously, some of these members, some of these witnesses are now in their 80s, 90s. I mean, obviously, the first-hand witnesses aren't going to be around forever, which is just a shame. But then I suppose you've got the second-hand and third-hand witnesses, Tom.
Exactly. The number of first-hand witnesses, in fact, we've found several in the last 2 months are still alive, but I'd say 95% of them are gone, and half of what's left are suffering the maladies of old age and cannot be interviewed effectively. But as you say, we are finding even the spouses are gone for the most part, but the children and the grandchildren are providing most of the follow-up information now, although we do find occasionally, and as you say, the first-handers are in their mid-80s and their early 90s if they're still alive.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question to you both now. Just take me through the Roswell incident for those who don't know much about it, and also why is it so important even still today?
Well, any of your viewers can go to their public libraries, and I think they would be amazed, even as far as throughout the UK at that time, that there was this major wave of UFO activity throughout the United States, starting in the latter part of June through the first part of July of 1947. New Mexico was the hotbed of all military technology and research at that time. The first atomic bomb was detonated in New Mexico. You mentioned the 509th Bomb Group, which had actually deployed the atomic bomb, the 2 drops over Japan. They were stationed out of Roswell. Over at White Sands Proving Ground, you had all the testing of the recovered German V-2 rockets. You had ongoing atomic research at Los Alamos. And according to the Air Force Project Blue Book, you had more UFO sightings at that time in New Mexico than anywhere else in the country. So it was just a matter of time before we would either come up with some hard answers as to what was invading the American airspace at that time, or, as in the case of Roswell, one of them had a mishap. One of them actually came down. One of them crashed.
Kevin, if I understood your question correctly, you're asking what is the importance of Roswell?
Well, that's right. Why is it still one of the most important UFO cases, and why does it still matter to the world?
Well, we had that question asked of us several times, and I always give the answer. It's man has always wondered, as long as he could look up at the sky, if we are alone. And it's the final proof, as far as we're concerned, that we are not alone in the universe, that there is someone else out there. So it answers that question. Now, as to what benefit might come from it, we have information about back engineering some of the Roswell wreckage. Things have been derived from it, but for me, it's knowledge for knowledge's sake that we are not alone in the universe.
Yeah, and I think this story as well, you both agree, is very nuts and bolts. It is still one of the pinnacle events in UFO history.
Yes,
well, we would say
I'm sure it's the same for Don, that the other UFO events, mostly lights in the sky, nothing that you can sink your teeth into.
Yeah.
The Roswell case, you're talking about a nuts and bolts craft with a crew, and it's a mystery left to us from the last century that is still alive today. But for me, there's no other UFO case on record that holds the importance or my interest. We both have been on this one case for over 20 years each. And I can't imagine anything else holding my interest that long.
No, exactly. So I'll just go back to you, Don, as well. Just talk us through very briefly the events once the craft came down, and also was it just one craft in your research that came down? Was it multiple crafts? Just take us through that.
Well, from all accounts, from all the information that we've been able to accumulate over these past 25 years, there was one craft. There were numerous sites involved. There were civilians involved in the discovery of a number of these specific sites. And from all accounts, from the people who were alerted to the crash on the civilian front, no one was able to identify any of this wreckage, the materials involved. And then after the authorities were finally alerted in Roswell, specifically the Chavez County Sheriff's Office, where the Sheriff George Wilcox, his deputies, none of them were able to identify this same material. They then in turn would alert the 509th Bomb Group at the base in Roswell. And it was the base commander, Colonel William Blanchard, who would dispatch not two lowly enlisted men to go check this out, but his two head of intelligence, the head of intelligence of the 509th Bomb Group, as well as counterintelligence. You had Major Jesse Marcel, as well as Captain Sheridan Cabot, who would follow the rancher W.W. Brazel, Mac Brazel, out to the site and examine the crash, the debris field, firsthand. The point we're making is that no one, we emphasize, no one is able to identify very common off-the-shelf material. I defy any of the skeptics, any of the debunkers to come up with a single witness who saw out at that crash site, saw out at the base, saw in the sheriff's office, saw at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, saw anywhere associated with this event. Neoprene rubber, reflective foil, wooden sticks, and masking tape. Because we have hundreds of witnesses who still, to their deathbeds, are telling us this was something extraordinary. This was something not manufactured on this earth.
That's right, and it was something that they still couldn't really put into words as well, I suppose.
Kevin, the bottom line is that we have amassed upwards of 600 first and second-hand witnesses to an extraterrestrial event, where the Air Force has not one witness to their position is this Project Mogul high-altitude balloon. We have no witness, first, second, third hand, to a Project Mogul event in Mac Brazel's pasture on the day of this event. Not one credible witness, where we have upwards of 600.
Okay.
We have been told that we could take this case into court by lawyers, and we would win hands down on our evidence that we have to date.
Now, the debris field, the size of it, I mean, we're talking, what, 3 miles or more?
No. It was about 3/4 of a mile long.
Right.
It was fan-shaped. It was a few hundred feet wide at the widest portion of it. But there was a gouge about 10 foot wide, few inches deep, that ran hundreds of feet from the upper pinnacle of the debris, which, as I described, fanned out from a northwesterly to the southeasterly direction. And this was, when you think about it, for as often as we have been out to the site, now mind you, we've had 3 archaeological digs at this site, and we're in the process of putting together our 4th such project. This is open range, it's high desert, it's pristine, it's unchanged over all of these centuries, that it's used strictly for the grazing of cattle and sheep. And there's no other recorded event at this location. There are just 2 possibilities on historic record. This was either where the crash of a craft of unknown origin came down, or it was a balloon. And as Tom just described,
yes.
there are no witnesses to any type of balloon coming down on this location.
No, that's right. And, you know, the excavation you're doing, which we'll get into after the break as well, I suppose there's lots of wind in that open plain, and I suppose anything could have been blowing, and, you know, debris could have buried themselves, and over time, as you know, as they do, and so I suppose that makes sense why you're going down that direction. But there was wreckage taken to families, like for example, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., whose father, Major Marcel, took wreckage back home, did he not, to show his family, and it was this sort of metal, this memory metal.
Yes. On his way home from the debris field on the, I guess it was the morning of July the 8th, 1947, he stopped at his home to show, he believed that even at that point, that it was an extraterrestrial craft that he had picked up pieces of. He stopped to show his wife and his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., who was 11 at the time. They spread the stuff out on the kitchen floor to see if they could, you know, like a jigsaw puzzle, put it together. And they couldn't, but he gathered it up and took it on to the base. But he wanted to make sure that he showed his family something from another world that he probably would not be able to show them again. So that's why he stopped. And I don't believe he kept a piece. Well, he did keep a piece for himself, because he and Sheridan Cabot, the counterintelligence officer who had gone out to the site with him, a few days later, they were in the kitchen. The wives were in the living room. They were in the kitchen trying to heat up this piece of memory metal in a pot, and they couldn't deform it anyway. And so someone said, well, you better get rid of that because you're not supposed to have it. So they went out back and they took the piece of memory metal with them, but they came back in the house without it. So the question is, what happened to that piece of memory metal that Jesse and Sheridan Cabot had? We've been wondering ever since.
Well, gentlemen, this is an honor to have you both on this time, but we're just going to take a short break now. After the break, the phone lines will be open for you to speak to UFO experts Donald Schmitt and Tom Carey, or to share your opinion. You can call us on 0292 000 3666, or text your comments and questions to 07728 758 759. International listeners outside the UK may Skype the show by adding the More Show live, or you may choose to interact with us on Facebook and Twitter.
The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. Broadcasting from the studios of Radio Cardiff, you're now watching The More Show.
Welcome back. I'm joined by UFO experts Donald Schmitt and Tom Carey. We are live and the lines are now open for you to call and speak to our guest or share your opinion. You can call us on 0292 000 3666 or text your comments and questions to 07728 758 759. International listeners outside the UK may Skype the show by adding the More Show live. Donald and Tom, welcome back to the show.
Thank you,
Glad to be
Kevin.
with you.
So, this is such an interesting, one of my sort of favourite topics, Roswell, because it really is, like I said before, probably it's a pinnacle part of ufology. And just before the break there, we did mention Mac Brazel as well. Now, Mac Brazel, he did change his story in the end to say that he had seen the bodies as well. Is that correct?
Mac Brazel, he was very tight-lipped about it. He was threatened with his life. His family was threatened. But his family members were able to get some things out of him after the Air Force let him go. And one of the things that they were able to learn from Mac was that he did see the bodies. He said he described them as something that no one, in talking to his granddaughter, Fawn Fritz, she asked him about them, and he told her it's not anything that you wanted to see. So he didn't describe them in great detail, but he absolutely, positively did see the bodies in situ, as we say, in the as they were found.
Well, I really love. Yeah, sure,
it's
go
our
ahead.
position that Mac Brazel would have found the bodies. We know precisely where this location is, this particular spot. It's about 2.5 miles east-southeast atop a bluff. And he had a number of young ranch boys, possibly a young ranch girl, who were with him at the time. And keep in mind that Mac Brazel had already mentioned bodies to radio reporter, newsman Frank Joyce at radio station KGFL in Roswell. And later, when he actually went to the radio station and retracted that information, he would make that remark about the bodies not being green. So he made specific remarks, as Tom described, in reference to the bodies, and first-hand remarks, no less.
Well, KGFL, the owner, George Roberts, he was threatened, I think, with the removal of his license from a US senator if there was any more sort of talk of the UFO incident taking place on his airways. So, I mean, the whole town was under siege. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, you mentioned
Tom, go ahead. Tom.
Yes. You know, for a rubber balloon, why would the Secretary of the Federal Communications Commission call up the radio station and threaten the owners with their license if they broadcast any more about the crashed UFO? There were death threats. There were threats to their livelihood. It was just something that today we would call civil rights violations.
Yeah.
And it's one reason that Don and I believe that the Air Force will never come clean on UFOs, because they do not want to come clean on Roswell and the violations to civilians that they perpetrated back in 1947 and after.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to do at this point here, you know, we're going to listen to a quick clip from Bill Brazel, because I think it's important just to, you know, just to bring a witness in here as well, just to hear a witness voice. So just bear with us while we just play this short clip.
The Air Force tried to make him believe that it was a weather balloon. And he said, Bill, he said, it was not a weather balloon. He said, I don't know what it was. But he said it was something altogether different and much bigger. And I was talking about it. I went into Corona and I was sitting there in a beer joint, and of course, my friends was asking me if I'd found any more or anything like this. And I said, well, I picked up a few scraps, about a cigar box full, and somebody, I don't know, must have informed the Air Force, because first thing I know, I have visitors, and they say they'd like to have this material. And they didn't tell me they'd confiscate it. They just said, well, like we're going to have it one way or the other, you know.
Thanks for letting us play that there, gentlemen. I just wanted to play that just to show, look, you know, witness testimony. It's what it's all about, and you know, to be able to hear that, you know, there's sincerity in that voice, I think.
That was from the home box office HBO documentary UFOs, What's Going On, from 1985, I believe it was.
That's right.
And it was probably the one and only time that Bill Brazel Jr. actually went on camera to do an interview. He probably talked to us personally, off the record and on, more than anyone else. In fact, we spent more time visiting with him right up until the very time he finally passed away, because we shared information and we became very close to Bill and the rest of the Brazel family. And as a result, we were able to understand that this has been something that has transcended 1947. that they have, as Tom described, the death threats, the intimidation, the harassment leading right up until today, the strange deaths within the family, disappearances that we will even be investigating and getting into at a later date, that the Brazel family, for whatever reason, now we want to emphasize that in Bill Jr. describing this material being confiscated, this happened 2 years after the incident. 2 years. If this was merely a weather balloon, why was the military so concerned about the physical nuts and bolts evidence?
Yeah.
Well, the balloon, again, would still be just off-the-shelf material. They were making sure that they confiscated and retrieved every last piece of physical evidence. Years, decades after. We have material that was stolen from people out of their very homes up until the mid-1980s.
Oh, my gosh.
Such is the surveillance of these potential witnesses after all these years. Not a weather balloon by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, and I've just got to touch on this. When Major Marcel was sent to, I think, was it Cosworth Air Force Base, Fort Worth, Texas? He flew in there with what he thought was with some material, I think. Now, when he did this press release to the world, we're just going to put the picture on the screen now. This was not the picture that's described in this. The description of this picture is basically where the balloon remains, but this was not to be true, was it? He was forced to change his statement. Is that right? He
was the patsy. He flew to Fort Worth believing that it was just a stop on the way to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. But it was his final stop. He carried a box of debris into General Ramey's office for the general to see firsthand. And the general told him to put it down on his desk, and they went into the chart room to look at a map to find out, to show the general exactly where the site was. So they come out of the map room, and lo and behold, the real wreckage is gone, and on the floor is the remains of a weather balloon and this ripped up tinfoil radar target. And all this is news to Jesse Marcel, because he says, where's the real stuff? This isn't what I found. And the general says, well, you just keep your mouth shut, get down on your knee and pose with the remains on the floor. And that's what he did. He was just a prop for a propaganda photo, which then traveled around the world as the real stuff. And we know it wasn't the real stuff, because when he got back to Roswell the next day, he told several people, including Walter Haut, who we knew well, that he was just bitter because they made a fool out of him by having to pose with the weather balloon.
Absolutely. And Don, it was in 1978 when he came forward on camera to tell the story of what had really taken place that day.
Well, and as Tom described, as far as Jess Marcel being the patsy, he was told, just be a good soldier, and in 5 years it will all come out. Well, 10 years, 15, 20, he waited 30 years. He was dying of emphysema at the time before he finally broke his oath of secrecy. And he stated on camera, and we can quote, being familiar with all materials, both foreign and domestic, I can assure you this was nothing made on this earth. Well, how much more specific do we want him to be? We're talking about the #1 intelligence officer in the American military at that time. We just heard one of the skeptics over in Britain just a few weeks ago make the remark that Jesse always said that the material in the photographs from Fort Worth was the real material. That's a bald-faced lie. In fact, every time Jesse was shown those pictures, such as by journalist Robert Pratt, he said, no, that's the material that they substituted for the real material. That's a matter of public fact, not to keep putting words in our witnesses' mouths for the sake of their own gullible audience.
Well, it only takes one person to say the opposite, and everyone goes for that. And it depends if they call themselves a journalist as well. It depends what their title is that people will listen. But it's such a shame that we live in a society like that. But I think there's a majority watching this now that think quite different. So you two come across so well in your work, and the thing I love about your book as well is it takes you through a journey where you may not be too sure to begin with, but as you start reading the book, witness after witness, there's truth there. It just resonates with you. So, with the remnants of this craft, there was only one. Let's call them grey, because it is. Maybe that's the right word for them. That was alive at the crash site. Is that right?
We have testimony from a number of first-hand witnesses that one was indeed alive at the crash site. Yes.
Okay. I have looked into...
The question that usually follows is, what happened to it? Is that your next question?
Well, no. There's you watch the different films, and there's different ways that people approach the crash site. Different sort of units that found the site. But there was one chap called Frank... No, I'm going to get this name. Is it Frank Kaufman? The 1947 Master Sergeant. He was a counterintelligence officer, maybe working under the classified unit name known as the 9. Now he says it was his unit that found the recovered disc, but by tracking it on radar. Just tell us about this chap.
That I think Don probably can address that better, okay. But I could just tell you that Frank Kaufman, we suspected when Don and I teamed up in 1998, we suspected at that point that Frank Kaufman was making up stories.
Right.
That he happened to be in the right place at the right time too often for our taste. And in the end, he finally did confess to us that he was making a lot of things up.
Well, let's leave that there, and let's go straight to a whole town, under siege, then eventually keeping the secret. Now, let's look at the time when this was, just after World War II. You've got the atomic base there, the 509 group. But there's another thread to this story as well. A lot of these people that kept the secret were Freemasons. Now, with the Freemason angle as well, it's known to be a society with secrets. So surely to keep a secret would be easy if it's a Freemason connection through most of these some of these higher witnesses.
It is interesting you do mention that, Kevin. It's something that we've looked into as an aside, only because we've had people belonging within Masonic temples throughout the United States suggesting that we look into the backgrounds of many of our witnesses. And as it turns out, then President Harry Truman was a Grand Master of the state of Missouri within the Masons. And we also learned that many military officers at that time were strongly encouraged to become Masons. And I think we've drawn the conclusion that it's one thing, and it was something that was emphasized to us by a number of congressmen a while back, that when you take an oath to the military, you're swearing an oath to the American Constitution. You're not swearing to any one person, not even to the government. You're swearing to the Constitution. And then with a Masonic association, you'd also be swearing to God. So they'd get you on both fronts. I'm not saying there's a connection. All I'm saying is that there was a connection, at least post-World War II, that it was a way in which they were able to ensure that people kept their mouths shut.
That's right.
And it worked splendidly.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break, and stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The Moore Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. Broadcasting from the studios of Radio Cardiff, you're now watching The Moore Show.
Welcome back. I'm now joined by UFO experts Donald Schmitt and Tom Carey. We are live and the lines are now open for you to call and speak to our guest or share your opinion. You can call us on 0292 000 3666 or text your comments and questions to 07728 758 759. International listeners outside the UK may Skype the show by adding The Moore Show Live, or you may choose to interact with us on Facebook and Twitter, where we have a number of texts which have come in. We will get to those, so just bear with us on those. Gentlemen, welcome back. And my first question to you, Donald, as well, is would you say that this is a world government secret nowadays?
Well, certainly Roswell placed the United States government in the driver's seat. They came into possession of materials that defied conventional explanation. As Tom described earlier, it would have, in reverse engineering such technology, it certainly would have given us total air supremacy. It would have taken us, most likely hundreds of years ahead of any other government around the world. And I know we've talked about this too personally between ourselves, that even the notion of foreign aid that the United States government is so quick to always, hand out money into the millions and billions of dollars throughout all these years since 1947. To me, it smacks of even hush money. The idea that you cooperate with us, you play our game, and we'll give you so much money every year by just cooperating. As even others have demonstrated, that clearly this has become a worldwide cover-up. And we just believe that in 1947, that Roswell was the impetus of that.
Well, isn't it strange that, since the 47 and since the late 40s, shall I say, technology just leaped, leaps and bounds. The transistor, and all the rest of the technology that came from that, and now that integrated computers, integrated circuits. We've done more in this past 100 years than we've ever done. And where did that technology come from, Tom?
Well, Kevin, a lot of it stemmed from, unfortunately, one of the spin-offs of armed conflict, in this case, World War II, is a lot of developments naturally occur after wars. And I, for one, had never placed much confidence in the notion of back engineering, say, the Roswell wreckage. But I have come around to the other viewpoint that, at least in one situation, the creation of the memory metal, we know for a fact that they instituted a project in 1948, right after the Roswell crash, to try to recapitulate, to reconstruct, re-engineer this so-called memory metal and all of those properties. This is the metal that you can wad up in your hands and place it over a flat surface, and before it hits the surface, it flattens right out. Well, one of our associates down in Florida has done a lot of research on the creation of this nitinol, and he's gotten a hold of the progress reports. And the originating organization for the development of nitinol was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And they farmed out the project to Battelle Memorial Institute in, I think it's Columbus, Ohio, to do the work. So at least in that case, I am confident, because we have the paperwork, and it all leads to Wright-Patterson, and all of that leads directly to Roswell. Now, as far as fiber optics, that's a possibility. I think the transistor was already in development, but you're right. After World War II, there were a lot of new developments that seemed to just burst out of nowhere. And I would submit a lot of them were the results of all these studies going on in World War II and shortly thereafter. But I think Roswell now is in that mix, that at least nitinol, perhaps fiber optics. I think Colonel Corso even mentioned Velcro, but I don't know about that.
That's right, Colonel Corso, The Day After Roswell, the author from that. That's right. Well, Don, I mean, do you think the cover-up still exists because it's really a cover-up of, well, ignorance in a way, in the sense that they still don't understand the technology that sat before them?
That is exactly the word, Kevin, and we use it constantly, that after all these years, it still remains a cover-up of ignorance. Just imagine a technology that is such a quantum leap advanced beyond our own, and what type of breakthroughs it would take to bridge that gap.
Well, that's
granted, there may have been some spin-off technology, but overall, it clearly appears to us that this is something that has been buried, that it has been crated up and hidden away after all these years. The old order in the military is not passing it down to the new presidents of the United States, are not told about this, that there's this shadow government that has preserved, this knowledge after all this time. And it's not because we're now driving cars and flying aircraft that possess, similar technology. No, we're still, internal combustion engines and jets and rockets. There may have been a few breakthroughs, but overall, cover-up of ignorance. That's the word.
Well, some of the people that I've interviewed in the past have talked about the ship being conscious. I mean, you just can't get your head around that, whether that's true or not.
Actually, it's been described that the crew actually would become an integral part of the craft, that by their very thought patterns that they would, as far as steer and direct the flight of the craft. Some of the talk, some of the documentation, Air Intelligence Requirement Division, when they sent out to their listening posts already in October of 1947, within just months of the incident, they were specifically describing craft devoid of propulsion systems. So we're talking about no moving parts. And so I think screenwriter Tracy Torme probably gives one of the best analogies that I've ever heard. Just imagine if you could take something as simple as a toaster and you could teleport it back in time, back to the Middle Ages, and they might be able to take it apart, put it back together again. But if you can't plug it in, you can't get it to work. So I think we are of the position that after all these years, they still can't plug in this technology. Cover up of ignorance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always surprising, though, that, well, not surprising, but when you look at things like the space station, for example, not that they would report, seeing unidentified flying objects, but it's part of the brotherhood, isn't it? I mean, they if there wasn't a thing that they spotted, it would be reported back to a central command, in a sense, and it would never raise its head into the mainstream as such. But I wonder if this craft, just about made it to planet Earth. Because why? Because one of the text questions was, why come all this way just to explode?
We have that comment given to us often, and our answer is that anything that's manufactured has its tensile strength, beyond which, if it's exceeded, it will disintegrate. And whatever this was made of, and we have some elements that in the nitinol study they've come across that it was constructed of. It obviously had exceeded, whether it was struck by lightning, or some other internal explosion, something internal failure. Its tensile strength was exceeded and it exploded. That's what we know. And this argument that, well, why did it come all this way just to crash? Well, it sounds pretty, like, wow, those guys, they should be able to overcome everything. But as we have said, anything manufactured has a tensile strength, and whatever caused it to explode and rain down debris on Mac Brazel's head.
Yeah.
One of the interesting theories is that, and it's only a theory, that the crash itself was staged. not by us, not by any earthly government, by the visitors, to demonstrate not only their mortality, but their fallibility, the fact that they were just as mortal as we were, to soften the blow of their arrival. And what truly shocked them was not our government making such an announcement to the world that we are not alone, that we are being visited, but rather to totally sweep it under the carpet and essentially make it into the biggest cover-up of all time.
Well, that's funny you say that, actually, because that's what someone else said to me. Well, I cannot remember the interview it was now, but I remember what you've said there just sparked something else off, where they said to me that these beings gave themselves to us. They self-sacrificed in a way.
That's a bridge too far for me.
Okay.
That's a theory. It's a theory.
It's a theory,
but
yes. I mean, and that was just his opinion from his research. But I mean, I like to stay just with the facts that we have, and but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, who knows? You know, are we ever going to know in our lifetime? But it is important to carry on the work that we're doing. You know, yourselves especially.
Are we ever going to know?
Well, are we going to ever? Is anyone ever going to come forward with, for example, actual physical evidence?
Well, I don't want to give away any secrets, but we are working on that. Yes, the answer to that will be yes.
Because that would change everything, wouldn't it?
Yes.
You know,
we've had numerous close calls in an attempt to retrieve physical evidence through the years, other physical proof that would demonstrate evidence beyond eyewitness testimony. It's something that at the same time as we focus on more and more a growing number of deathbed testimony, another reason that we're having another archaeological dig, because there have been artifacts discovered. There have been testings conducted at numerous laboratories verifying the other tests of the same material. So it's nothing we've gone public with heretofore, but the investigation remains very fluid, and as a result, we are the proactive team. We are the people who are out in the field, in the trenches, as opposed to the skeptics nipping at our ankles who seldom, leave beyond the keyboard of the computer, where it's very safe to attack without actually getting their hands dirty.
And there's a few of those out there. I'm not going to mention any names. I know a few that you're talking about as well. Now, your book, Witness to Roswell, we're going to link this up on our site. This is a fantastic book. Please do support these guys. Get this book. It makes a bloody good read as well. Now,
it was the #1 best-selling UFO book in the world for 2007 and 2008.
There you go.
In the world, yes.
There you go. Now, you are working on a new edition, am I right, with some extra bits in?
Yes, it will be out not in Witness to Roswell. We have a new book coming out in August called Inside the Real Area 51, The Secret History of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And it begins where Roswell left off, because all of the Roswell books, including ours, end with the material and the bodies being delivered to Wright-Patterson or Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. Well, we go into what happened after that. And it's all new material, and it answers a number of questions that people have about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And Don was a disciple of J. Allen Hynek, the Air Force consultant, who was an astronomer at Northwestern University and Ohio State University. And Don knew him very well. Information about J. Allen Hynek, all new, will be in this book. We answer the question of, was there really a Hangar 18? That's answered. And lots of other stuff about Wright-Patterson. And it truly was the real Area 51, so to speak.
Excellent. Okay. And my final question to you both, just very briefly, how has your work spiritually changed you? I mean, how do you see the universe now? How do you, what's your views on life, in the sense that we're not alone?
One of the things we'd like to look into, it's something that I've discussed with I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, and it's amazing how many priests and even an archbishop that I know personally truly are big fans of our research, are constantly, when I run into these clergy people, always asking questions as to the nature and the present state of the investigation. Keep in mind that in the summer of 1947, the Vatican put out a statement which read, "It was the position of the Church that the universe is most likely teeming with other creations." Now, they reiterated that position just a couple years ago. So I also remind people, who operates more observatories throughout the world than any other corporation? Well, the Catholic Church. And it's not because they're watching for the second coming.
No, that's right.
They obviously have 2,000 years of recorded evidence of UFOs. And so I think the next thing that Tom and I tackle after Roswell will be, what does the church know about the subject, which would go back for centuries.
Okay, and Tom, your views as well, please?
Yes, I am not as religious as Don, although I do believe my wife is very spiritual, and I do think there was something, spiritual in our being. I have always suspected, though, that there was other life in the universe, and Roswell has certainly confirmed that for me. But just as confirming as Roswell have been the studies by the Kepler telescopes. They're finding new planets, a number of them Earth-like. They call it the Goldilocks zone. That's is in that distance from their sun that that can support life. So they figure that those sorts of life-sustaining planets are in the billions in the universe. So the skeptics like to say, well, that's probably true, but it still doesn't mean that they can get here from there. And Roswell, at least to me and Don, has proved that they have solved the problem of getting here from there, wherever there is.
Okay. And Don, the website, please?
www.roswellinvestigator.com. Roswell Investigator, one word.
Well, Donald Schmitt and Thomas Carey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, Kevin, for having us. Our pleasure.
I can't wait to get you back on. Thank you. Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on The More Show via themoreshow.co.uk. Do like us on Facebook for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.